reports at the Elegant Hotel stymied the Beaumont, Texas police. They could find no motive for the killing of popular oil and gas man Greg Flenkian, and no explanation for how he had received his strange internal injuries. Bent on tracking down his killer, Flenkian's widow Susie turned to private investigator Ken Brennan, the subject of a previous Vanity Fair story. Once again, as Mark Bowden reports, it was Brennan's sleuthing that cracked the case. Greg Flenkin traveled light and lived tidy. After so many years on the road, he would leave his rolling suitcase open on the floor of his hotel room and use it as a drawer. Dirty clothes went on the closet floor. Shirts he wanted to keep unwrinkled hung above. Toiletries were in the pockets of a cloth folding case that hooked onto a towel rack in the bathroom. At the end of the day, he would slide off his worn brown leather boots and line them up by the suitcase, drop his faded jeans to the floor, and put on lightweight cotton pajama bottoms. Most evenings he never left the room. He would crank up the air conditioner. He liked a cool room. At night and sit on the bed leaning back on two pillows propped against the headboard. Considerately, to avoid soiling the bedspread, he would lay out a clean white hand towel on which he placed his ashtray, cigarette pack, lighter, BlackBerry, the TV remote, and a candy bar. He smoked and broke off candy bits while watching TV. This is where Greg was on. The evening of Wednesday, September 15th, 2010, in room 348 of the MCM Elegante Hotel in Beaumont, Texas, lounging, smoking, snacking on a Reese's Crispy Crunchy bar, sipping root beer, and watching Iron Man 2. He missed the ending. Greg was accustomed to solitary nights. As a young man, he had worked as a chief engineer on ocean-going vessels, spending months at sea. In middle age, he reinvented himself as a landman, a familiar occupation in South Texas, easing the exploitation of mineral rights on private property for gas and oil companies. Slender, with a close-cropped white beard and the weathered skin of a lifelong outdoorsman, he had partnered with his brother Michael in a thriving oil land leasing business based in this small city east of Houston. Every Monday morning, he would make the 2-hour drive in his pickup from Lafayette, Louisiana, heading west on Interstate 10 through scruffy Gulf Shore farmland, broken only by cell phone towers, oil derricks, and billboards advertising motel chains, bayou restaurants, adult superstores, and other local attractions. It took him through the stink of the big ConocoPhillips refinery at Lake Charles, a forest of piping, giant tanks, and towering trees. The hotel was just off the cloverleaf outside. Beaumont, his company, rented him a room in the cabana, a 3-story wing that wrapped around a small swimming pool framed by potted palms. That Wednesday night, watching his movie, Greg got an email from his wife, Susie, shortly after 7. Susie was using a computer program to file for a tax extension. After she reported her progress, he wrote back, "You're doing good, babe." At some point during the loud computer-generated showdown at the end of the film, amid all the fake violence, Greg was struck from nowhere with a very real and shattering blow. A blow so violent it would blind a man with pain. He managed to get off the bed and move toward the door before he fell, legs splayed and face first. He was probably dead by the time his face hit the green rug. The following morning, Susie Flenkin called Greg's office. Husband and wife. Dead on the rug, prone and doubled over, a spent, cigarette cupped delicately between 2 stiff fingers of his left hand. Room 348 was stuffy and exceptionally warm. The man's skin color had gone grayish-blue. There was a wet spot at the crotch of his blue pajamas, but that wasn't unusual. Detective Scott Apple showed up a little more than an hour later. He is a short and very fit man, with graying hair that he wears combed straight up, in spikes. He is all cop. His wife had been a cop. He met her on the job. He was one of the assault team leaders on the department's SWAT team. He is one of those men who never stop working. But there was little here to interest him. No sign of a break-in or struggle. Nothing disturbed in the room. No blood or obvious wounds. Flanagan's wallet was still in the back pocket of his jeans, and a stack of $100 bills in it. So, robbery wasn't an issue. Those staying in nearby rooms had heard nothing. As Apple questioned the neighbors, he told them it was probably a natural causes thing. Sad. He poked around Flanagan's bags, looking mostly for pills, some clue to his collapse. There were none. Susie and Michael later told him that Greg never went to a doctor. He was a stubbornly independent man, suspicious of authority and unmoved by the modern passion for health and fitness. He did not exercise. He had chain-smoked his entire adult life and had the nagging cough to prove it. He neither drank nor ate to excess, but did both. Freely. It was easy to conclude that his choices had simply caught up with him. Susie was ready to believe it. She was. Shocked and grief-stricken, but she accepted that for Greg. Sudden death was a possibility. In fact, she took some solace in it. He had checked out his own terms. Many times she had heard him remark, upon hearing of someone's dying suddenly, "Lucky bastard. That's how I want to go." And so he had. At the hotel, the police saw the death as routine. A photographer snapped pictures to make a record of the scene, and the body was. Drive by a transport service to the Jefferson County Medical Examiner for an autopsy. The only mystery here appeared to be medical, and it was likely a minor mystery at that. Dr. Tommy Brown had a time-tested method. It took him 45 minutes to conduct a post-mortem exam, inspecting a body inside and out, measuring and weighing organs, all the while describing what he found and noting the metrics that fleshed out the official form. He was all business crisp, efficient, and confident. Brown was thin and bald on top, and a spray of unruly white hair on the sides that gave off a mad scientist vibe. He did everything fast. He even talked. Fast. He was a local character part of the legal landscape in Jefferson County, and a respected one. Where death was concerned, in this corner of Texas, Dr. Tommy Brown's word was law. The circumstances of Greg Flanagan's death, as reported, were unremarkable. On the table before him was a 55-year-old Caucasian male who appeared to be in decent shape. After methodical inspection, the only marks Brown found on the body were a 1-inch abrasion on his left cheek, where his face had hit the rug, and curiously, a 1/2-inch laceration of his scrotum. This was interesting. The sac itself was swollen and discolored, and around the wound was a small amount of edema fluid. The bruising had spread up through the groin area and across the right hip. Something had hit him hard. The story his body told grew more intriguing. When Doc Brown opened the front of the torso, he discovered a surprising amount of blood and extensive internal damage. A certain amount of partly digested food had been torn from his intestines. The doctor found small laceration there, and on the stomach and liver as well, as 2 broken ribs and a hole in the right atrium of his heart. The condition of his insides reflected severe trauma. Flanagan had been beaten to death, or crushed. Brown concluded that the wound to his genitals likely had been caused by a hard kick. He had also taken a blow to the chest so severe it had caused lethal damage. He would have bled out in less than 30 seconds. When he got this surprising news, Detective Apple called Brown immediately for an explanation. The doctor told him that the man in 348 had suffered the kind of severe internal injuries he was more used to seeing in crash victims, or in someone found under a heavy fallen object. There are not many murders in Beaumont. Greg's was one of 10 that year, which was about average. Most are not mysterious. Detective work was usually a matter of doing obvious interviewing the drunk boyfriend with gunpowder on his hands, or finding the neighborhood drug dealer who was owed money. A case like this was a once-in-a-career event. If you don't enjoy working a stubborn whodunit, which Apple does, then this one was an exciting challenge. The problem with the hard cases is that they are indeed hard. Over the next weeks and months, Apple chased down every angle he could imagine to explain the death of Greg Flanagan. But about 6 months into it, he was stuck.
Okay,
Physical
sige.
evidence didn't add up, unless Greg had been
Padumi mo
beaten to
muna ba?
death elsewhere, and his body had been returned
Pauwi ka na?
to the room and carefully placed. On the rug, nothing about the scene added up to a crime.
Sige,
How
ingat
does a
ka na.
man
Ha?
get
Hindi ko maintindihan
beaten
eh.
so severely
Sige,
that
see
ribs
you.
crack,
Pauwi mo.
inner organs tear, and the heart ruptures,
Right.
all without significant damage to his torso, other than the
Bye-bye.
bruising and the cut at his crotch? Flankian's outer body showed no signs of beating. And how could such a rumble have taken place in the hotel room without a thing being toppled or even disturbed, without anyone in? Adjacent rooms hearing a thing, and there was no answer to the all-important question, why? Greg appeared to have had no dark enemies. Apple talked a lot to Susie. She had been in her 20s, a singer in a rock band when she met Greg. She clearly adored him. Susie was a delightfully offbeat Southern belle, buxom and pretty and warm and oh so deferential, but also, in that time-honored Southern way, stubborn as a tick. She was heartbroken and furious at the same time. Greg was the nicest man she had ever met. He was so nice she had married him twice first, as kids, and then, after parting ways for a number of years, again in middle age, when Susie first called him again after that separation. He said, "I've been waiting for you to call." They had been married the second time for 15 years. His brother and co-workers said he had been universally liked their company. His life at the Elegant rarely intersected with anyone else's. He went to his room early in the evening and usually stayed there by himself until morning. Greg had never been seen down at the bar. He did not socialize or drink a lot or pick up women. This was not a drunk. This was not a philanderer or a man who got into fights. This was a decent, honorable, smart, and successful man whom people liked, the sort of man nobody would murder. Yet somebody had. Through the fall and into the winter of 2010, Apple pursued a number of possibilities. Maintenance records showed that at some point early in the evening of his death, while cooking pre-packaged popcorn in the microwave, Greg had inadvertently blown an electrical circuit. The outage had affected the adjacent room, 49, and the rooms directly underneath. Greg had called the front desk to report the outage and confessed his role sheepishly to the man who had come up to reset the breaker. This led to two theories. The first involved sex. The Elegant maintenance man happened to have a rap sheet as a sex offender. Might the puncture wound to the scrotum and internal injuries have been caused by a long screwdriver, some sort of bizarre and kinky assault? Apple spent a lot of time talking to the maintenance man and looking into his background, but this theory never advanced beyond wild suspicion. The second theory involved a group of union electricians staying at the Elegant, a number of whom had been in the room next door, room 349, on the night Greg died. They were in town for an extended stay, doing a job for an oil company. At night, they tended to assemble in one another's rooms to drink. What if some of them had been partying next door when their electricity went out? Might one or more of them have knocked on Greg's door, and perhaps drunk and annoyed exchanged words with and then assaulted him in the hallway? Could Greg, badly beaten, have returned to his room and then collapsed? Some of the electricians had been questioned on the day the body was found, but none of them said they had any interaction with the man in 348. 9 days after Greg's death, Apple and a colleague returned to the third floor of the Cabana wing to question some of these same men again. Apple was wearing a hidden video camera. The men they encountered were friendly and appropriately curious. "What happened to that guy anyway?" asked Lance Muller, a sharp-featured man with dark, thinning hair dressed in a t-shirt and blue jeans. Muller was the man registered in room 349, along with a roommate, Tim Steinmetz. "Hell, I don't know," Apple said honestly. "That's what I'm trying to find out. It was almost like something fell on him or something. We're just trying to see if somebody heard something, or maybe if somebody knows, or maybe if somebody messed with him." Muller and Steinmetz had nothing to offer, nothing to... The two electricians said they thought they had heard the man in the next room coughing when they returned from the bar. Mueller seemed as confused as Apple was about the idea that something had crushed the man. "There's nothing in these rooms heavy enough," he said. Down the hall, they found 3 more. Of the electricians Trent Pisano, Thomas Elkins, and Scott Hamilton. The men were friendly and tried to be helpful. One said that when he had seen the body on A. Gurney in the elevator, he had first assumed they were caterers delivering a cake or a big food tray. "That's a better thought," said Apple. Pisano said he had been in the room with Mueller and Steinmetz that night, but hadn't seen anything. The electricians handed over their driver's licenses and gave Apple their cell phone numbers. They would be in town for a few more months, if anything came up. Happy to help. Weeks went by. Months went by. Apple worked any theory he could imagine. He considered the possibility that Susie had her husband killed. He considered Michael Flanagan, Greg's brother and partner. There was nothing that even hinted at either person who doesn't love a mystery solved. It creates order from disorder, salves our ache for moral balance. An unsolved mystery is like a stone in your shoe. That is where the case of the body in room 348 was by the end of 2010. Scott Apple was stymied, hoping to unearth something new in November. The family had put up a $50,000 reward. It produced nothing. Michael hired a private detective from Houston, a former FBI agent. Apple met with the man and reviewed the case. That was the last he saw him. The matter of Greg Flanagan was bound for the cold files. It would be just another sad box of notes and evidence stored in the Jefferson County courthouse. Ken Brennan took Susie's call on the golf course. She was surprised that he picked up the phone himself. Ken Brennan speaking. "Oh my God, you don't have a secretary?" Susie asked. She was flustered. The detective had answered on the first ring. She could barely get the story out. Greg's death, the coroner's finding, the dead end. He asked her to send him some files. He'd take a look. She said she had been feeling under the weather, but she would try to pull together what she had pronto and send it off to him. "Well," said Brennan, "you need to fucking take care of yourself." Like everything Brennan says, this came in a thick New York accent and a voice. That sounds like it's strained through a cubic yard of gravel. It was a no bullshit, you better listen to me command that was all the more startling because he had said something tender. It endeared him to Susie immediately. Brennan is a former Long Island cop and DEA special agent who now makes a good living as a private detective in Florida. That's why he was on the golf course in February. He is pushing 60 still. Solid and always tan and stylish in the South Florida manner. Blue-eyed, thick-necked, and ruggedly handsome. He is partial to lightweight, short-sleeved shirts that show off his torso and big arms. He wears flashes of gold at the neck and wrist, and Irish rings on several fingers. Brennan's hair is mostly white now, and is combed straight back on the sides and straight up in the front in a low-key pompadour. Cocky but dignified. Months earlier, not long after Greg was killed, a young lawyer friend, Kia Sherman, had told Susie and Michael about Brennan, sharing Susie's frustration with the investigation she had hit upon, the strategy of filing a lawsuit against the hotel as a means of pursuing the probe privately. She had read an article by me in this magazine, The Case of the Vanishing Blonde, December 2010, detailing Brennan's remarkable success in resolving a 2005 cold case in Miami. Now, when the investigation seemed hopeless, Sherman brought up Brennan again. "If you want to do something," she urged Susie, "you have to. Call this guy, the one I told you about. Just find him. Brennan can be readily found on the internet and is asked to take more cases than he can handle. People come to him with unsolved murders and disappearances. He takes these people seriously and handles them gently. When he reads a file, he is looking for a case that intrigues him, but also one where he thinks he might be able to accomplish something. I ain't in the business of giving people false hopes," he says. The Flanagan case appealed to him because of the mystery, but also because there were so many avenues to explore Greg's family and co-workers, hotel guests, the maintenance man. To Detective Apple, none of these leads seemed fresh anymore. To Brennan, they were all new and potentially promising. He knew that a fresh pair of eyes was, perhaps, the most valuable thing he brought to an investigation. Brennan visited Lafayette in April. He worked Susie over first, asking her a lot of hard questions about their relationship, about Greg's faithfulness, about insurance arrangements, satisfying himself that the wife had no clear motive to have him killed. "Let me ask you one more thing," said Brennan. "Was there anything about the crime scene that didn't seem right to you? That seemed off?" Susie told him that. She was surprised that the room was so warm when Greg's co-workers entered it the following morning. Her husband liked to crank up the AC at night. Then Brennan went home and made arrangements for a second trip to Beaumont. Apple came out to a sports bar to meet him. The two men ate and talked. Brennan told Apple what he always tells the cops he meets in his work. "Listen, I'm not a maverick. I don't go doing things half-cocked. If I decide we're going to do this, we're going to do it as a team. There's nothing I'm going to do that you're not going to know about it. There should be nothing that you're going to do that I don't know about. For one thing, I have to fuck up your case. I've been doing this a long time, but I also know that you're the guy in charge here, so it's your case." Part of what was going on was Brennan checking out Apple. "I don't want to work with somebody I don't like.